You found your way to Blood Moon Radio. I'm Coraley, and this is where we follow the threads the world wants us to drop. Today on Blood Moon Radio, I sit down with Lucy Baldwin. Our conversation takes us through what it means to work with the planets as living forces. We speak about shadow work, about longing, about the uncomfortable places where self-concept dissolves, and about the radical idea that our desires may be initiatory rather than indulgent. There's something quietly subversive in Lucy's approach, a willingness to look directly at what we want, what we fear, and what we unconsciously participate in. This is Celestial Kink. Welcome to another episode of Blood Moon Radio. Our guest today is joining us from Connecticut. Lucy, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's a little chilly here. It's been a mild winter and we got a cold snap, and I'm a bit of a baby about it.
Yeah, it was negative 2 degrees when I drove my kids to school this morning. It was chilly.
I'm like a mid-temp girl. I like the mid-temps. To get started, I thought you could talk a little bit about the difference between astrology and planetary magic, just to give us a background in that before we delve a little further into what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So astrology is really studying the movement of the planets and where they are in relation to the signs, and look at your natal chart and how the different planets affect you based on the signs they were in when you were born. Planetary magic is actually, I don't really work with the signs a whole lot. It's much more about taking the planets as allies, treating them as deities, honestly, working with them as these forces, these archetypes that we can call on for favors, that we can use to bring parts of ourselves forward to achieve things or get things that we want, or come into different relationship with ourselves. So I think of planetary magic as a much more active way of engaging with the planets.
It's giving animism vibes that underlies all witchcraft, right? So do you work with the archetypal symbolic energies for each planet, or are there different interpretations of that energy that you're working with?
Yeah, it's the same. Jupiter is expansion and growth and building over time, investment, wisdom. It's kind of the same archetypes as they are in astrology, just applying them in a very different sort of way.
So I guess you could say the planets are sort of living intelligences in your practice.
Exactly. And in each of us also, I see them as making up the full spectrum of the human psyche.
A lot of witches that I've talked to are really interested in psychology, and they overlay so well. So when you're talking about archetypes, I'm thinking, well, I guess that's part philosophy too. Jungian archetypes, how they play out into psychology. Is there an overlay with the archetypes of the planets and psychological processes, or do you view them as separate? Or not processes, I guess, psychological theory?
Yeah, I mean, I have a degree in cognitive science, which is psychology and philosophy and anthropology and all those things. So I definitely have a psychological orientation towards maybe everything. Like, I think of everything in terms of the human mind, because to me, that is what we are. We have bodies, obviously, that's a huge part of it. I think the body is so crucial to the human experience, is what makes it what it is. And also, we only actually experience our body through our mind. We experience everything through our mind. So I'm always thinking about the lens, definitely.
I don't know what it is with witches and psychology, but we're like right in there.
Yeah, definitely.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about shadow work and inner healing, and why people do many years of shadow work without their outer lives actually changing.
Yeah, so I actually think of magic in general as a process of personal evolution. We're really, when we're doing magic, we're always doing it on ourselves. We like to have this idea that we're doing it on the world around us, but we're projecting that into existence. So it's really on ourselves. And when we change ourselves, everything else changes in response, of course. But it sounds like you're specifically asking me, how come people get kind of stuck with shadow work? It's kind of interesting. I've seen over the years, for a long time, it seemed like the spiritual world was really wrapped up in this law of attraction. Don't think bad thoughts, like you'll attract negative things. And there was this fear of the darker sides of the human experience and fear of uncomfortable emotions and experiences. And I feel like there was kind of this swing to the other side where then everybody was worried about spiritual bypass, very rightly so. And that led to, I actually came up with a term for it, the opposite of spiritual bypass, which I call spiritual fractalization, where you actually just dig in. A fractal is a repeating pattern where you can zoom in and the pattern just keeps repeating. On the opposite end of spiritual bypass, where you're like, no, I don't have any problems, everything is perfect, and trying to whitewash things, there's this thing where people just study themselves and are always looking for the story behind everything that happens. And I think that that is also just as much of a trap because we want to understand ourselves, and we love stories. Like, humans are storytellers, but sometimes we get caught up in writing those stories and creating those stories and studying our pain, and we can lose sight of actually moving through it in real time, in the moment. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to bring forth with the magic that I teach, is the wisdom. There can be, especially if you've been avoiding and suppressing, great, really helpful to actually own, claim, and honor the truth of your pain and trauma. But at a certain point, we have to come back to the middle and think about moving forward and working with just what's present and not having to have a story or an explanation for everything that we're feeling.
That makes total sense. And I think everything you were saying, I was thinking about, the toxic positivity that can happen. I have PTSD, and I can remember a point where after I was diagnosed, I was like, oh, this explains what's going on with me. And you kind of cling to that, right? And it's the same thing that you're describing with clinging to delving into shadow work, getting too caught up in the explanation. I think I'm bad for that because I'm an overthinker.
Yeah, well, I think it's almost like phases. I feel like I also was diagnosed with PTSD at one point, and it's like you almost need the toxic positivity initially to move forward and have there be time and space so you can be so in it. You can just let it breathe. And then eventually we're ready to confront it. And then it is helpful to be diagnosed and to understand, oh, this is where all that was coming from. And it helped me de-identify with those things. It also helped me release shame, and there is taking ownership. And I hear a lot of people getting diagnosed with ADHD or autism can really help them see themselves in a different light and make sense of themselves and feel just such relief. But then it's like, okay, from there, now what do we do to move forward and not take on the identity of I'm a broken person?
I'm glad you brought up shame. It's been a theme that's come up a lot this season, but it's also a subject that I think is very interesting. And what you're talking about, shadow work, embracing the parts of yourself that maybe you feel ashamed about and owning it, I think is so key for people healing and also just doing better in life. I've seen and experienced, even for myself, where when you feel shame, you're trying to avoid it, and it can create so many issues. I actually had an author on at the beginning of the season. Her name's Jovita Bydlowska, and she wrote a memoir years ago called Drunk Mom, and she has a new memoir coming out called Unshaming, where she kind of tackles that topic. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah. Shame is a huge, huge thing that can keep us stuck in not feeling good about ourselves and holding negative beliefs about ourselves.
We've talked a little bit about planetary magic, and we've talked about shadow work. I want to talk a little bit about, in modern witchcraft, there's a lot of aesthetic, conceptual work, or people delving way into the psychology of it. I think that's probably a side effect of the fact that we have social media. In order to get followers and whatnot, you have to play into aesthetic. But what's missing out of magic when it becomes aesthetic, conceptual, purely psychological, instead of looking at these other topics we're talking about, the energy work, the shadow work, the awareness of things as a whole versus picking pieces and clinging to them.
For me, I think there's just a big piece here about devotion. And I think that's why I use the planets and work with the planets because I like having this external idea that I'm working for or in devotion to
Yeah.
because it creates a sense of reverence and a sense of connection to something bigger than myself. And I think that for me, when I look at our society and culture, I feel like people are struggling with a lack of meaning. And when you study anthropology, people have had religion and religiosity forever. It's intrinsic in human nature. And I think a lot of us think, oh, we're post the need for those kinds of things. And I'm not saying that I think magic or planetary magic should be a religion, but I do think we need something that reminds us that we're connected to something bigger, that helps us find that deeper meaning in our life. And so a lot of things in our culture have just been broken up into pieces so that you can have these little bite-sized chunks that give dopamine and are missing the whole, like, all the ice underneath the iceberg, you know? And I think devotion is actually a big piece of this and finding those moments of deep profundity for existence and gratitude and just kind of holy shit, it's crazy that anything even exists at all.
Yeah.
And I also think that, we're all doing magic all of the time. And so I would rather that people are identifying as magicians and witches than something else. Like, I think that that's an empowering identity to take on. So I guess better that than something that is less empowering.
Absolutely. You're talking about human experience, and you're right. Spiritual or magical thinking, I don't like using that term, but because it's been used derogatory, but like in a positive sense, has been a part of humanity forever. It also brings about connection too, right? Because when we're talking in magical terms, animism, energies, the earth, animals, every person, then the belief system is you're connected. Where do people most often avoid their power, even when they think they're doing the work? Because you work coaching people, you have coaching courses for planetary magic and shadow work.
I have courses where I teach about like the different, like working with the planets. And I've also done coach training certification programs that I've taught. And I think that one thing that this is making me want to talk about desire. Like, I've heard this explanation of desire as actually exactly what's happening right now. This comes from this One Taste. I don't know if you've heard of them. They were around for a long time. The woman who created One Taste is actually in jail now because they were doing a lot of like shady stuff. But she taught desire as exactly what's happening right now. This is your desire. Whatever you're experiencing right now, this is what you desire. And so there's kind of this idea that we are creating our own reality. So whatever it is that we're bringing in is what we want. There's a part of us that wants it. I do feel like this is both extremely empowering and can also be kind of a dangerous thing to take too seriously. If you hold things with the sense of right and wrong and good and bad, it can get really messy, especially when you think about actual bad things happening to you.
You brought up desire, and I feel like that's a good segue into talking about what is existential kink.
Yeah, so I am trained and certified in existential kink coaching, and I trained and certified existential kink coaches for a couple of years. It's actually based on a book written by a friend of mine, Carolyn Elliott. It's called Existential Kink, and it's a practice where you essentially try to get off on. And by get off, I mean, it doesn't have to be erotic. For me, a lot of times it's laughter or just tingling or just feeling that heart flutter. Mostly it's laughter for me, but for some people it does feel like, turn on. Just around your don't like situations in your life. So this comes from this idea that there is a part of you that is greater than you realize, much more vast than you realize, that actually just enjoys the full ride, enjoys everything that is happening. And you can tap into that part of yourself. And the way that I teach people to do it is not through, I just want to be really clear, not through trying to convince yourself that you like something that you don't like, because that will never work. It's through the body. So you think about a don't like situation and feel what that feels like in your body. A lot of times you'll find, oh, these sensations are not bad. They're actually enjoyable. And then you can start to give yourself that permission to actually enjoy it. And then you can get off on the situation, and it will shift it. It moves the energy and lets go of that thing, like whatever compulsion is behind that thing, whether it's like brokenness or a bad relationship dynamic or whatever don't like situation is in your life. Just letting yourself enjoy it. It's exactly what you're talking about with shame. It completely dissolves the shame. It's really hard to get off on something if you're ashamed of it. But if you can just give yourself that permission, it just releases you. It frees you from it.
It's that embodied work that you see with yoga. As humans, we tend to want to be comfortable. So we ignore or push away or avoid things that make us uncomfortable. And paying attention to your body and how you feel about things has such huge benefits mentally. So does existential kink complicate or deepen traditional means of manifestation, or do you view it as something completely separate from manifesting, and it's just the work of what we are just talking about, embodying and releasing feelings around things that you're uncomfortable with?
I see it as actually shadow work that opens the doorway to being able to manifest. So if something is stuck and you have these repeating patterns and you're just like, I can't get out of this situation. And I've had this experience many times with existential kink, and I've honestly seen hundreds of people have these experiences over the years where we're taught, no, don't think about it, don't go there. And if you just let yourself get off on it, it truly releases the charge, and then it can come through and you're able to manifest the thing that you wanted. And I was really stuck for a long time in something with some things like money and stuff like that. And then as soon as I was able to get that, like, I was just giddy with laughter. It was wild. This was my first kind of big EK moment. I could not, I even thinking about it now, I feel it, the laughter just bubbles up inside of me, just like my own sort of failure. Like it was so silly. And doing that just shifted everything for me.
Before, you were talking about divisiveness. You were talking about seeing things as black and white versus coming to the middle ground. And it feels a little bit like that's been your work with all the different pieces we're discussing, is trying to bring things to the middle ground. And there's such benefit in that. I think, especially when we're talking about looking at how the world is, we can see what happens when people stop being able to even just hold space for something else and become so divided. And your work would start at the place where everybody should, looking within yourself. Where do these opposites happen in me versus me being able to embrace all of it or find the middle ground?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. That's a huge, huge part of everything. And even with the planets, I realize a big part of why I like working with the planets is because there are seven of them. We're sort of taking the human psyche and we're breaking it up into these seven categories. We can use it to look at where we're out of balance, and we can actually work with the planets that complement what we're already doing to call in that balance, that other energy. So if I'm swinging really masculine, I can bring in more feminine. And if I'm swinging really all about newness and that kind of like Mercury, like speed, and I can call in Jupiter, more like long, slow. So, yes, 100% balance and finding, because we need just that little bit. We have to own the fullness of ourselves. Like we're animals, we can't hide from that. And when we honor that, we can work with it.
I think there's a lot of themes right now in the world, but also in magic, centered around power, manifestation, magic itself, because I've seen some magic posts in places I didn't expect to. And I believe that witchcraft is inherently political, but there's not always talk about responsibility. What does grounded, ethical magic actually look like in practice in modern times?
Yeah, I think this is so important and a really good question. And I think this is why, I mean, I really believe, and I think I kind of already said this, that magic is something we do on ourselves. It's an evolutionary process we take on ourselves. And I don't actually believe in cursing people. Like, I actually don't think that you can. I think
Yeah.
that you can only ever do magic on yourself because we're influencing our own reality. And I don't think
Mhm.
that anybody has that kind of power over somebody else's mind.
Yeah.
So I think just having that awareness, but also having that boundary. But a big piece of this is I almost hate to say this because it's embarrassing, but so much of this actually just comes down to self-love. That's ultimately what we're doing is coming into wholeness with ourselves. And when we do that, we can come to love other and appreciate other. And I think we just have so much more acceptance of each other when we have more acceptance of ourselves. Which isn't to say that you have to. I'm not one of those people who's like, you can't love other people unless you fully love yourselves. Like, I think that's a little bit too far. But I do think that when we're in this relationship with ourselves, where we're giving ourselves the space and time and holding ourselves and doing the work on ourselves, it does ripple out. And that is how we help each other.
You don't have to be embarrassed to use the self love description. The whole way the podcast came about is so much in my life happened all at once, like hard things all at once. And I've posted a lot about self love, not in the cheesy love yourself way, but in the it really is the only place that you can heal certain things. And I do believe it makes a difference in how we interact with others. And I think a lot of us don't treat ourselves as well as we try to treat other people, particularly if you're talking about how we love other people. You know, I've had to think a little bit over the last year. The way that I show up for my kids, do I show up for myself that way? 'Cause I'm a single mom. There's no one else that's going to show up to take care of me. I have to take care of me. And throughout my life, and probably some of the experiences I've had have been heavily influenced by this, I haven't done that. I've overgiven to other people and not taking care of myself properly. So it's partially ownership. And I do think it's important because I do think we're raised, especially women are raised not to do that. It's not healthy. like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we actually end up better able to take better care of other people when we're taking better care of ourselves.
absolutely. You brought up baneful magic, and I wasn't intending to talk about this, but since it's on the floor, it does play a big role because witchcraft is much more visible in social media, and baneful work is a part of a lot of practices, and it gets so hotly debated, but almost always it turns into people discussing whether that's a Wiccan belief versus old magic, old folk magic, or old belief systems before, we had the dogma of organized religion. Do you have any insights on that topic? I guess it feels a little bit, and I think this is just the nature of the internet. Like sometimes you don't want to weigh in because you don't want to step on other people's toes, but at the same time, that silencing your own voice or your own practice is a hindrance not only to you, but also to other people who may be inclined to think the same way as you.
Yeah, I feel like I am oblivious to the conversation, if I'm being honest. I feel like I've been in my own world with this. I obviously have seen a lot of people definitely get into that kind of stuff. And I really try to preach that we're all just doing our best.
Yeah.
And I really genuinely believe in the innocence of everybody. And I think that a lot of people are confused. I'm not saying there's no bad stuff happening in the world because there absolutely are things that are devastating and horrible. And there are people perpetrating things that are devastating and honestly make me sick. And those people are broken and they're confused, but they were born innocent humans and they were corrupted, and I believe that anybody could have their redemption story. And it's not up to me to decide. I think that that's their path to figure out. And so I just really try to stay in my own lane. And that's where what I need to do for myself to sleep at night is take care of myself, and I'm going to let other people have their own process. And maybe they'll like, I think we've all done things that we regret in our lives, and we grow from that. And that is where shame can be powerful and helpful, like one of the few places. So I do think in general, though, we're doing our best. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not up to me. Like, I'm not God. Like, I don't get to decide who gets
Yeah.
punished. And yeah.
Your empathy and understanding are really beautiful. So witnessed. And as you were talking, it struck me, if there's someone out there, because I've seen a lot of baneful workings on social media right now and calls for people, if they feel called to join, to put their energy into that. If there are other practitioners out there who don't use baneful magic as part of their practice, but they're feeling helpless and they want to take some power back and put it towards more good coming out in the world, do you have any recommendations for ways they can do that without participating in something that they may not believe ethically in doing?
I mean, there's so much. There's so much that we can do. I think that coming together and doing ritual in groups to bring about, the evolving consciousness of people is one of the most powerful things that we can do. Is just helping people, everybody along and ourselves in evolving our consciousness to find more of that love and connection. And that, because that is what people are. They're hungry for love. People are hungry for love. And I would also say, though, on a similar note, I work with Saturn for protection. And I think Saturn is amazing for protection magic. If you want protection magic, just I don't use it for, I genuinely don't think that nobody could ever do a curse on me that would work. Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. But I do use it for protection from just like anything and everything. And that's very powerful.
Since you mentioned it, if you don't believe in baneful workings could influence your environment, when you do protection magic, is it then just protecting your energy from poor behavior or other people's energy fields affecting you? Or is there a broader sense that you use that for, like other realm workings or energies?
I mean, like, this is like a whole, I feel like I could talk a lot on this, but we're not safe, right? Like, what even is safety? What are we even protecting ourselves from, right? Because we're
Yeah.
like, nobody makes it out of here alive, and nobody makes it out without suffering and pain. But I think of it actually, and what I actually ask for is to stay on my path. So the things that come into my life, challenges that come into my life, are teaching me the lessons that are going to help me evolve in the ways that I want to, and help me become the person I'm trying to be. And so I actually think of it as, I guess you could say, like protection from distraction, protection from unnecessary tangents, protection from things that aren't teaching me the lessons that I want to learn.
Do you have any stories where working with a specific planet had a large impact on someone's life or problems that they were dealing with, and then they brought this in and it had an influence?
Yeah, I do. I have numerous stories like this, specifically with Saturn, people working with Saturn, because a lot of people avoid Saturn is like time, and time is always death. And a lot of people see Saturn as this malefic, bad, scary, don't go there. And I specifically, Saturn is kind of my number one planet that I work with because, well, probably you've got this vibe from me by now. I'm just like, let's go. But also because I like time management and the limitation. I think that I've really come to see how the human experience is so much defined by our limited, finite time that we have. And we don't even know how much it is. And so it's impossible to even imagine what a human would be without that constraint on us. A lot of people have been through my Saturn course where I teach Saturn magic, and it has just helped them come into right relationship with life. And I've had numerous people they'll just even reach out to me spontaneously, like, this course completely changed my life. Working with Saturn has completely changed my life. I couldn't even, juggle daily life. And now I'm taking the program again and I'm adding things in, like I'm adding in practices, and I'm actually thinking about what I want to be doing, not just trying to catch up with life. And So I see a lot of that. I've also had people take courses and tell me afterwards they manifested a house or things like that. But I think that the Saturn stuff lately has really felt like where so many people are seeing the biggest change, because it's like anything that you're avoiding, when you go full on into it and you really take it on and you treat it like an ally, it can have incredible transformational power.
In your experience, do most people that start working with planetary magic end up with a favorite planet? Because it feels like Saturn's your favorite.
I think a lot of people have core themes that they're working on in their life. And so for some people, it's like they're kind of always in relationship things and it'll be relationship stuff. And so there might be a planet they're working with that, like Venus or Mars or even Mercury, or maybe they have a lot of health stuff. So they might work with the sun and that might be the planet that works for them. Or if building a business is your big mission, for me, it's this like navigating, I don't know how far to get into this, but like my human design, I don't know if you're into human design, but I have a really low energy. Like I have no motors and I like really struggle with needing a ton of structure, but had no discipline to be able to even create structure for myself. I have 5 kids. I have like a very chaotic, I was really in the chaos myself. So Saturn has helped me figure out discipline and structure and things that I couldn't even conceive for myself before, sort of my core thing that I'm working on in my life.
So when we're working towards wanting to explore shadow work or parts of ourselves or improve our life, like when you're talking about using planetary magic or you're talking about using shadow work to delve in, I think in modern life, we tend to think we can do this by extreme discipline or forcing ourselves versus the kind of softer, more feminine approach of devotion. Like we're talking about devotion to a specific planet or a deity, or just getting in tune with the spiritual side of yourself or your shadows versus I'm going to force myself into whatever I think is better.
Yeah, that force, that's Mars. That's the Mars approach. I think we've got way more Mars in our society than is
Yeah.
healthy for anybody. And that's why people get burnt out. And that's why we struggle. And that's why we just try to force ourselves to do way more and white knuckle through life. And that's also, us just working like way too many hours, especially in the US. Like we just work like a bajillion hour weeks and just our whole society's running on caffeine and just ramped up. And I think that the devotion piece, it's just letting that fall away, finding that balance, and exactly like you're saying, coming into right relationship. And I think a huge piece of it is just, this is why I love working with the planets. It's trusting, finding that faith and trust that I'm going to feel I'm going to move when I need to move. I'm going to create when it's time to create and when I'm ready to create. And then it's going to be amazing. Whereas if I try to force it, it's not going to be what it's supposed to be. And so just trusting the timing and coming into seeing it more as a dance and my own relationship with my creativity as something that I'm bringing forward that's maybe not even coming from me. I don't know where I don't know where it's coming from. I'm just a vessel that's bringing it forward, and that can't be forced. A devotion as a way of sometimes showing up is actually to not show up. Sometimes showing up means taking a bath or taking a nap or just lighting an incense and having gratitude. And I think that the gratitude piece is a really big part of it, because we can't, people always want more, more, more. And it's like, you can't take on more if you're not holding what you already have. And how do we do that? I think one of the key ways that we do that is with gratitude, just by having genuine ability to tap into gratitude. And if you're struggling to tap into that, then that's the place to start. And that's where the devotion can come from. It can come from feeling grateful and feeling appreciation. And then that can be the thing that makes us want to show up again and again.
I do pull a tarot card every episode. Are you okay with me pulling a card for you?
Absolutely.
I have my last question, but before we get to that, I want to touch on, you brought up like in the US, the hustle culture, which I mean, we see here in Canada, right? You're our closest neighbor. We're our closest ally since we've both existed. And so much of Canadian culture has been influenced by America as this super force in the world. But so much of that has come from that hustling, that working. I would hope for the American people that there's less work and less focus on money, and you can do more things and live your life and be connected with your family and your friends and see your country, like go travel, because you have so many amazing things there. Do you see it as that will be a positive outcome to where we're sort of at in the world? Or do you think the direction is more, it's going to be more of the hustle at the end of everything?
I'm disconnected from a lot of that culture because I just live in my own magical bubble. But I don't know if I see it changing. I thought it seemed like there were going to be changes because a lot of these big companies were having more insight into overworking people and how that actually produces less that way. But it seems like we've just gone further and further in that direction. I don't know. I read this really good book recently by Cal Newport. It's called Slow Productivity. And it's basically about how if you just actually do less, you'll do more.
Yeah.
And he really gets into corporate jobs and how so much of it is just them emailing each other back and forth and creating work, just making up work for work's sake to look busy. And so much less is getting done. And it seems like this out of control. I really like how he explains it in the book, like kind of out of control spiral that I don't know, because the future is so like now the federal government demanding everybody goes back to work in the office. Is that actually going to make people be more productive? That seems like we're going in the opposite direction of what Cal Newport is suggesting, which is let's slow down and let's each try to do fewer things. But I don't know, because AI is emerging, and how is that going to change things? So far it hasn't. We've actually had AI for a long time now, and not that much has changed as far as I can see. It's a much slower. I think we were all expecting this kind of like big pow, like everything's going to change all at once. And instead, it seems like we're still just on this sort of slow degradation of our culture and society. But there are a lot of people waking up to it, but the screens are just such a thing. So it's so hard to predict.
It is. AI comes up all the time on here, and a lot of witchy leaning people are very anti-AI, but it's not going anywhere. Almost every program I use, every update, suddenly there's AI something, right? We live in interesting times. This deck has 2 extra cards, and you happened to get one of them, or I pulled one of them for our episode. It's called the Celestial Weaver, and it is about power manifestation and interconnectedness. And I thought that was kind of spot on given how our conversation has gone.
Yeah, power manifestation and interconnectedness. Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. So my last question is, for someone listening who feels like they're called to start exploring magic, but they're weary of delusion, escapism, which is probably a big thing right now, and bypassing, what's a safe, embodied place to begin looking at magic or bringing magic into their life?
I mean, I would recommend just light a candle and say a little prayer to Saturn and ask Saturn for some guidance, because Saturn will never let you bypass. Saturn will never let you. I can't remember all the things you listed, but Saturn is like, no, we're not messing around. Yeah, no illusion. Saturn is very much like breaking the illusion and coming to reality and being in the body and being present with the truth, the hard, kind of inescapable truths of life, that when we accept those truths, that's when we can really fully live. And so I would definitely say work with Saturn if you're worried about those things.
As always, thank you so much for listening. You can keep up with Lucy on her Facebook, Lucy Baldwin, Instagram, lucy.baldwin.author, or YouTube at Lucy_Baldwin. You can also check out her free membership, Inner Circle, her shop, and courses on her website, www.remelinacoaching.com. I'll have her website linked in the reading room, along with the books we talked about in the episode. If you want to dive deeper into episode content, we do that on our membership sites, which you can find on the website also. With pricing starting at just $5 Canadian a month, there's a way for everyone to participate and go a little bit further into the Blood Moon universe. And until next time, remember, the truth echoes louder after dark. Whispered, unfiltered, waiting to be touched. See you soon.